The general rule is to keep your cold foods cold, hot foods hot. So try to keep them away from that 40 to 140 range. In between those two temperatures is where bacteria really like to grow. So you want to try to keep the cold foods below 40 degrees.
Whether it's convenience, to save money, or eat healthier, millions of Americans carry their lunch to school and work. However, if proper food safety precautions aren't followed, that sack lunch could actually make you ill. On today's Sound Living, tips for making safe and healthy sack lunches. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service, food that's brought from home can be kept safe if it's first handled and cooked properly, and then kept out of what's referred to as the danger zone, the temperature between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, where harmful bacteria multiply rapidly. If that sounds too complicated, just remember to keep cold foods cold and hot foods hot. K-State Research and Extension food scientist and coordinator of the K-State Rapid Response Center, Karen Blakeslee, says making safe and healthy sack lunches isn't difficult. It just requires some planning. Karen, we're at that point again where students are going back to school. Mom and dad are trying to figure out what to do for lunch. For a lot of kids, it involves the school lunch program, but for many others, it's whatever mom and dad and they decide the night before, maybe even that morning. In terms of sack lunches, we've made some advances in how we pack things, and that's kind of where we want to start, is just looking at start to finish, the process maybe we should go through when we're thinking about putting together a sack lunch. And really that starts by making sure that you practice some of those food safety habits we talk about, and that starts with a clean surface, clean hands, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And it could even go back even farther by shopping at the grocery store. Keeping your food safe when you're shopping at the grocery store, buy those cold items last. And then when you're transporting them home, it's still hot outside, so you still want to keep those things cold, especially if you have a good distance to go. So it's a good idea to take along some kind of an ice chest or some kind of insulated bag with some kind of way to keep them cold, whether it's one of those frozen ice packs or even just some ice to keep your food cold. And then once you get home, have your kids help you put your sack lunch together and teach them those food safety rules. Washing your hands, that's the first thing you should do before you do anything with handling food. And then, prepare those things. Think about what kind of bag you're going to put these in. A paper sack probably isn't the most practical thing to use anymore, although we kind of all know what that means. So there's so many different kinds of insulated carriers out there now to transport your lunch in, from fun bags that are more kid-friendly, so they don't look like a lunch sack. They got all kinds of fun designs on them, but they have some type of insulation in there to help keep your foods cold. Or in some cases, if you are going to package something that's hot, then you need some kind of separate carrier for that, like a thermos or something like that, so that it keeps those things hot.
Yeah, so few people have access to a microwave at school, that you really can't depend on that kind of a heating system.
That's right. If you are packing something that, especially for kids, they probably don't have time to find access to a microwave anyway. So it's probably more practical for a kid's lunch to be kept cold.
When you're thinking about that lunch bag, you really need to think about how you pack their lunch, because some of them are upright, some of them are more flat. So it really kind of depends on how you're going to use that.
That's right. Try to lay out the food so that you can keep it as cold as possible, whatever needs to be cold. You may have to use a couple ice packs, put one on the bottom, one on the top, or put them on the sides. However it configures to get the maximum coldness to that particular food. Now, obviously, something like chips or cookies or something like that, those don't really need to be kept cold. It's the sandwiches, or if you have something like applesauce in there or something like that, those really need to be kept cold so that they taste fresher and they're safer too.
You mentioned sandwiches. A lot of people think of the standard peanut butter and jelly. Some schools I know don't allow that because of the peanut butter, but for those that do, you do have to think about the jelly, because that typically is kept cold.
It typically is. It's probably a low-risk type product because it is pretty high in sugar, because sugar suppresses the growth of bacteria. So a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is probably the least risky type sandwich to pack in a lunch. But if you're going to have something like a meat or a cheese or something like that, then you really do need to keep that cold. And I'd also look at what other kinds of things you're putting on there. Maybe you've got something that's really moist, has a high moisture content, if it's like a mayonnaise or something like that, or even like a tuna salad or chicken salad or something like that. Those can really make your bread soggy. So it may be something where they have to assemble the sandwich. So, maybe for younger kids that may not be a good thing, but for the older kids, they could probably do that just fine.
Normally we think of something below 40 degrees as being the optimal temperature for keeping things cool.
That's right.
And that's what we're striving for, even
Absolutely.
with a sack lunch?
Yes, yeah. The general rule is to keep your cold foods cold, hot foods hot. So try to keep them away from that 40 to 140 range. In between those two temperatures is where bacteria really like to grow. So you want to try to keep the cold foods below 40 degrees.
When we're talking about packing the sack lunch, there are a number of containers that you can use. There's obviously just Ziploc bags. Any thoughts on those? Yeah,
there's even plastic containers with lids on them that can provide some structure to like a sandwich or something that could easily be smashed inside the sack lunch. Plastic reclosable bags are really handy to use, plus they're easy to clean up. Of course, your plastic containers can be reused, which can be very eco-friendly. You have a little cleanup as long as they come back home with the lunch. So with the empty lunch bag, that's the trick. So, those firm containers, like those plastic containers, can really help keep things separated really easily. And you could probably compartmentalize your cold foods a little easier with those too. So it takes a little planning. And there's, I think there's some lunch boxes that have separate compartments in them so that you can kind of control what needs to be really kept cold.
We also want to make sure that the food we're putting in there is ready to eat. That means washing the fruits and vegetables ahead of time.
Exactly. Give them a good wash, scrub what needs to be scrubbed, peel what, that would help too if something needs to be peeled, like carrots, for example. Of course, you can buy the little carrots that are already ready to go, those little baby carrots. But if you're looking at maybe saving some money, sometimes those baby carrots can be a little expensive, and it's a little more economical to buy the whole carrots and clean them up. So, there might be some prep work. It also depends on your child, whether they like the peel or not. So maybe you could have them help you prepare those things. So keep them washed and then put them in some kind of a plastic bag or some kind of container so that they stay clean.
You really want to make sure that what you're doing is something that they're going to eat as well. So that's another reason to do that pre-planning, because if you keep packing stuff they don't like, they're not getting as much lunch as you think they're getting.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that also goes back to having them go shopping with you so that, you can introduce them to some new foods, have them help prepare the lunch too so that they have a little more investment in it, and then maybe they're more likely to eat it that way. Every once in a while, throw in one of their favorite snacks or something like that so that they still get a nice treat, but you also want to try to keep it healthy too.
I know when I was a kid, we used to like to do the trade. That may be something that kids want to think twice about, because you know how your mom or your dad packed it, but you don't know how your friend's mom or dad packed it.
Well, and actually that also leads into some risks of food allergy problems. We are seeing so many more kids that have problems with food allergies or food intolerances, such as gluten or lactose intolerance. So when they start trading foods, that's pretty risky. And if somebody has a food that may not have any peanuts in it, but maybe the person who prepared it was handling peanut butter on the knife that they used, that little tiny amount could cause a problem for somebody they're trading the food with, and they have a peanut allergy. So they really need to be very, very careful about that.
What about in terms of beverages? Are there some guidelines? I know I've heard from some parents who say, I like to freeze some of those juice boxes because that helps keep things cool and it's normally thawed out by the time they go to lunch.
Yeah, that's another way to provide a cold source to keep the lunch cold. And by the time lunchtime rolls around, they'll be fairly thawed out. They may have to squish it a little bit to make sure it breaks up, but that's just one more way to make it a little easier. Most of those things can be frozen, and maybe not something like milk. Milk doesn't freeze the best, But your juices, those little boxes, or even some of those little bottles, those can be frozen.
If you decide to do things ahead of time and put it in the refrigerator at night, any considerations there as you take it out and get towards morning?
Just keep things cold, and, wait till the last minute to transfer from the refrigerator to your lunchbox. And then just don't forget to put the extra ice packs in there so that you keep things cold.
Is that one of the problems that parents maybe face, is the fact that they get up much earlier than the children? They make the lunch right away, leave it sitting on the counter, and a couple of hours have gone by before you even head out the door?
Yeah, and, we're all so busy. I don't know anybody who's not busy. So time crunch can allow you to forget things. And so just, figure out a way to have a routine in the morning and maybe wait to put those lunches together until you're ready to go out the door.
Along that same line, what about if there's some food left over after lunch? What should the kids do with it?
Yeah, if they have any leftovers, depending on what it is, if it's part of their sandwich or something like that, their lunch bag with those ice packs in there may not keep it cold the rest of the day. If they have a way to use a refrigerator at school, that might be something they could check or ask the teachers and see if that's possible. But otherwise, if it's something like meat or cheese, any kind of cut fruit or anything like that, they really should not save that for later use because it's just harder to keep them cold.
Is it also kind of difficult for parents to put their own leftovers into their child's lunch? Is that a little bit riskier as well?
That's a little riskier too because, leftovers, they've already been heated or cooked or prepared once. You've put them in the refrigerator, and ideally they should be used the next day. I wouldn't go any more than a couple days, but it's just a little higher risk to put them in a lunchbox for kids. So save those leftovers just to eat at home.
Maybe a good idea for parents to have at least 2 sets of lunch bags just in case one of those does get left.
Yeah, just in case. It happens. It happens. We all forget things. So have a backup lunch bag so that you can always have lunch made for your kids the next day.
As parents and children are walking through the store and trying to come up with things that they'd like to put into the lunch, you really should be kind of thinking this, I guess, along the My Plate guidelines where you're looking at some fruit, some vegetables, whole grains, trying to get just what you would get with the school lunch menu, but maybe just things they enjoy a little more?
Absolutely. Look at what the school lunch menus are providing at schools and follow those guidelines because they are trying to follow the My Plate guidelines. When you're making a sandwich, use a whole grain type product. It could be part whole wheat flour. It doesn't have to be 100%. That's ideal. But at least introduce those whole grain products that way. Using lean meats and colorful vegetables, a variety of vegetables. You can have all kinds of things. And a low-fat dip to dip those in. I've seen some research where kids are more apt to eat vegetables if they have some kind of a dip. Just adds more flavor because they say, if they eat a plain carrot, it's boring. And it is boring. So offer that dip, but make it a lower fat or even a low fat type dip to add some more flavor to it. And even the fruits, make them easy to handle. Peel them first if you need to, but the peel adds a little fiber to it. So encourage them to, like on apples, eat that peel too. That's good for you. And then the juices, if you package those little boxes of juice, if you can find ones that are 100% juice, that's better than your punch drinks or something like that because those are really pretty high in sugar. So look for ways to introduce those more nutritious options in a lunch sack. And if you have to sneak them in, but, be upfront with them and say, let's just try this once. And you never know, they just might like it.
That's K-State Research and Extension food scientist Karen Blakeslee. Karen is also the coordinator of the K-State Rapid Response Center. More information on food safety, health, and nutrition is available at county and district extension offices and on the extension website, www.ksre.ksu.edu. You can also find additional information on the Rapid Response Center website at www.rrc.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.